Antony Loewenstein joins us from Sydney, Australia. He's a Middle East affairs analyst and author of the Palestine Laboratory, also author of Israel, My Question. Antony, thank you so much for joining us. Just a couple of quotes, because after those missiles were dropped from the air, Ahmed Zaki, a resident of Jenin, says columns of Israeli army vehicles then came in on the outskirts of the camp. An ambulance driver there says what is going on here is a real war. Is it a war?
It has all the hallmarks of one. What's happening really here is almost, I would say, the Gazification of the West Bank. What Israel has been frustrated with for years is the fact that there keeps on being resistance to its occupation. The occupation is now 56 years in counting. It's the longest occupation in modern times. And many Palestinians in the West Bank, and of course in Gaza too, do not accept increasing Israeli occupation, militarization, violence, and settler pogroms on Palestinians. Jenin has long been a spot of resistance against Israeli occupation. That's obviously deepening in the last years. And the current Israeli government, including some of its more hardline far-right ministers, are talking openly about not just wanting all-out war, but in fact encouraging it. And this, of course, benefits nobody because it doesn't change anything on the ground, doesn't change anything about the occupation. So this is a really disturbing but unsurprising development.
How difficult will it be for Palestinian politicians, for the Palestinian authorities, Antony, to stop a full-scale war from developing? In terms of, there may be provocation from the Israelis, and there are reports of masked Palestinians in the alleyways around Jenin waiting for those troops on the ground to engage in fighting with them. How does the Palestinian Authority and politicians pull back from that provocation?
You know, one of the reasons this is happening is because the Palestinian Authority is basically absent. There really is no decent functioning Palestinian Authority. It exists on paper. There are Palestinian ministers and there's a nominal Palestinian government in the West Bank. But in practice, there is nothing really that does anything to help Palestinians. So any kind of pullback, or not resolution, but any kind of softening will probably happen because neither side, at least now, wants to have full escalation, because full escalation, a lot of Palestinians have a very dark memory of the last Intifada roughly 20 years ago. Massive bloodshed on both sides, huge numbers of Palestinians killed. And there are many people, as I said, in the Israeli government now who want far more death. I mean, Itamar Ben-Gvir, the police minister, said just last week that if necessary, and he says it is necessary, we need to have potentially hundreds, if not thousands, of Palestinians killed. Now, he calls them terrorists, of course, but they're not. I mean, many of these Palestinians are fighting legitimate resistance against Israeli occupation, which is defined under international law. So the Palestinian Authority, sadly, is virtually absent. And that, of course, is what Israel and much of the West has wanted for a long time.
Yes, and politically, has the Palestinian Authority almost been sidelined by Benjamin Netanyahu's government continuing to expand, or at least have the idea and gain permission for the expansion of illegal settlements? We had last week the Prime Minister Netanyahu saying to violent Israeli settlers, stop it, don't grab the land illegally, almost underlining, if you read between the words, saying that the Israeli government and I will do that for you.
Well, and the fact that the Israeli government is saying of a government of settlers, I mean, the Israeli government is a government of settlers. There are key settlers within the walls. They've breached the wall. Look, the Palestinian Authority, in some ways, although Israel routinely criticizes it and says that they're a bunch of terrorists, they need that army. They need that essentially that colonial brigade. Why? Because Israel, Netanyahu, in fact, last week said to the Wall Street Journal that he wants them not to collapse because they are the most effective enforcer of the occupation. They're often ineffective, they're often weak, they're often useless and absent, but they exist, and they provide almost like a insurance policy that Israel can say, we don't control the West Bank, we have no influence there, it's run by the Palestinian Authority. I mean, it's nonsense. Any Palestinian will say that's complete nonsense. But I think this escalation is what Israel wants. And at the moment, which has been the case for years, there is no serious international party, I'm talking about the EU or the US, or frankly much of the Arab world, that has any serious interest here in not just stopping these outbursts, but in fact reversing it or saying that the occupation must end. Israel has complete and utter impunity. Despite maybe comments now and then that one reads from the US or the EU, Israel has impunity. And until that stops, this is only going to keep on getting worse with the government of settlers that Israel currently has.
Antony, you know we always appreciate the analysis. Thank you so much indeed. Antony Loewenstein in Sydney.
Thank you.